please welcome the President and Sabina Higgins.
First of all, I want to warmly welcome you all to our Senator Sabina and I are delighted that you have been able to come. Your organisation is a very interesting one, with an enormous range, as indeed with its 135,000 members and 5,000 in Ireland. And I think that in itself is important, but I particularly want to say a few words about how important your work and the initiative Young Ireland Dare to Dream is. I'm very pleased as well that you honour me by asking me to accept the Charles Jacob Gold Medal in your centenary year. So may I thank Michael McDowell for the Managing Director, the Chair, the Vice Chair, the Treasurer, the committee members, and all of you who are here this afternoon. When I was a very young sociologist, I remember studying at that particular time what was then called the Sociology of Work. The Sociology of Work disappeared beyond the frame, and other titles came to what was described as industrial relations, human relations. The terms change. I remember when I was studying with Dilbert Miller in the United States, it had actually become the sociology of organizations. I also am very interested in the fact that Professor Charles Handy was a previous recipient of one of your award. Charles Handy and I share the fact that we were both interviewed by John Quinn for his Open Mind series. And I very clearly remember Charles Handy's work. Indeed, as I remember also, another person who was interviewed for the same series, Professor Mike Cooley. I think that your own initiative, and in reference to what you're doing, which I so warmly welcome, your initiative of providing opportunities for young people is so incredibly important. In several of my speeches in recent times, I've said that the unemployment problem is the greatest problem in Europe. 26 million people without work, seeking work, and then 5.7 million of those young people under the age of 35, and 2.3 million people, I think, approximately, when we looked at the figures last, people who are neither in education, nor in employment, nor in training. I think this gives the prospect in Europe of an entire lost generation, but not only, as I say, lost generation, but a generation at risk, located as they are, many of them in Europe, in cities with very large populations and available for the predation of other antisocial influences, including racism itself. Young people in Ireland I have had some contact with, because last year we had a consultation on being young and Irish, and we had, I think, interaction with about 800 young people who are talented, committed, very strongly ethically focused. And it is maybe one of the great sadnesses that in producing such highly qualified people, our economy hasn't expanded to be able to offer them the opportunities of staying here. But it's a pity that we have to lose them. I think that the opportunities you provide being work experience and so on is very important. I'm also very interested in the discourse recovering itself to where we will be talking once again about the world of work. Whether one is in the public service, one who is working in the private sector, whether one is self-employed, work is irreducibly a human activity. It is the life we have, this one conscious life. So therefore, the one thing which I would have in common with Charles Handy and Mike Cooley is a complete agreement in relation to the human aspect of work must never be forgotten. It isn't a place to which you just turn up and go home from. And I always remember one of the great phrases in Galway that I had once about how to say the wrong thing. It was, I think, the organisation of a Christmas party that I attended. And I asked the managing director, what did he say to the workers? And he said, well, he said, I said to them after I had finished, you're off the leash now. pretty much you like. And I thought to myself, here was I, after that stage, about 30 years studying sociology, and it was a case of being back at the beginning, I thought again. But it's very interesting. Charles Jacob was a founding member of your institute. It's very interesting, Charles Jacob's manual about health and conditions and the women workers in 1911. It's at a time when there's very little sensitivity to the needs of workers, particularly women workers. There are about 22,000 Irish people at this time in the war effort in that year, and labour is earning 16 to 18 shillings a week. The separation allowance is 12 and 6 for the woman who is left at home if the soldier is abroad, and about £1 a week for if you have 3 children. But I think it's very interesting that when I think of why did he address the consideration of women workers? You could argue that he paid more attention to women workers than many people did later, because the Irish Women Workers Union, which was set up by people like Rosie Hackett and others, was somewhat neglected. And late on into the 1950s and so forth, when you have legislation in Ireland, it draws a distinction between men and women in relation to employment conditions. And even when it does recognise women's work, it draws a distinction between married women and unmarried women. So we had to come a long way. He's very, very far ahead of his time in 1911. Really, the Jacobs factor at that time, medical and dental treatment, safe and hygienic working conditions, recreational facilities, and training and personal development opportunities. And the welfare in work booklet is so thick at this stage of it all. It isn't just it's just a pamphlet. I think when I talk about work, it's very, very interesting about the people I mentioned, dear friends of mine. I know John Sandy, but I knew Mike Cooley much better. Mike Cooley was from Tuam. He's one who received the alternative Nobel Prize, and he has a doctorate in computer-aided design and also a doctorate in physics. But he started in the Tech in Galway, as it would be called. He and Tom Murphy and Michael Brennan were both in the same class. They went to the technical school because I remember Mike Cooley saying to me that his mother knew how to make 42 different kinds of bread. And they wanted to make things, so they decided they'd build an airplane. And it required all these skills. And later on, Mike Cooley would write about the 180 skills that were involved in operating a lathe properly and so forth. But when we were asked by John Quinn to give our lectures on the Open Mind lecture series on radio, Mike Cooley so impressed me because when Lucas Aerospace was closing down its different plants in different places, one of the things he did was to do an audit on all of the skills that were there, and then they decided, why don't we make new products? So they went on to make a piece of equipment for spina bifida children. They do things in relation to dialysis and kidney treatment and so forth. But he said, Mike Cooley said, work is important to human beings. I don't mean grotesque alienated work, but work in its historical context, which needs hand and brain in a meaningful, productive process. If you ask anybody what they are, they say, I'm a fitter, a turner, a teacher, a nurse, or whatever. We relate to society and to other people by the work we do, and we learn and develop as we work on the world about us. And he said to me then, in a letter he wrote me, I personally have never met an ordinary person in my life. All the people I meet are extraordinary. They've got all kinds of skills, abilities and talents. And that is in your own literature that you circulated in recent years. You point out the importance of everybody's work, no matter where they are, and particularly thinking that you happen to be doing the exciting kinds of work where people find to have to invent artificial categories for what they do in order to make it sound exotic. The fact of the matter, it is that you would be able to enjoy what you're doing because it is important, and also because it is a reflection of yourself. In that sense, I think that the emphasis that you've had in your literature, which is a literature that Charles Jacob had, And he said that it was what you wanted was not so much alienating work, but a community of work. So I think that sometimes there is a great phrase, when I hear phrases that are insensitive and rather silly, really, like downsizing and others. There are ways of saying when you can't carry the investment anymore, but you don't have to abuse all the available language all around you. There are others as well in relation to the abilities and that are there. I think one of the most interesting things about it is those young people, and I know the work that you have done in cooperation with Minister Joan Burton and others is such an important work. The important thing about it is that these young people that will be coming into your different places and that will be are involved in that wonderful project are young people who are entering a particular stage of their lives where the whole world is open to them, and wonderful things happen when people are allowed to be creative. I'm speaking later on in the week at a conference on innovation and creativity. And I sometimes point out to people that you could innovate very destructively, as in shadow banking, for example, but you could also innovate very positively. But it's a great privilege. It's first of all, and why I'm delighted that you were all able to come, and I hope you enjoyed the hospitality here, is about three things, really. The importance of work. Whether one is baking bread or whether one is taking decisions at a board meeting, it is one's human activity, profoundly human. Second is you're honouring me by presenting me with the Charles Jacob Gold Medal in your centenary year. I very much, as I said, am honoured by both your institute and also by the man whose name you were invoking, Charles Jacob, and his interest in work. Powerful ethical example that he had, and most important of all, I'm very happy to be associated with the initiative that you're taking for Young Ireland Dare to Dream, which pays tribute to the extraordinary future that we have there if our young people are given the opportunity of expressing themselves and creating the kind of Ireland and the kind of Irishness which they want. So, Arish, Malam Gamora Nogator Shulek Institute and Chance at Victor Kadina Din Yoga, August Alcohoirehe, and Queen will Shevek, Brana Honor and Fane, three and on three and Rata Tashaviano, Nanam, Charles E. Jacob. Agus Sasulam Gameg Rag Spanach to Gakrot Meg Shulag Hane in our goal at the Esulia, our Valley Esulia. In all the different ways that you are all working and meeting other people and human groups of all kinds, and your institute itself. May I wish you every health, happiness and success in the years to come.
Thank you very much for your kind words. I knew you were something of a student of the history of work, but so my name is Peter Cheese. I'm the Chief Executive of the Cipd, and it gives me great privilege and honour to be here and just address a few words and thoughts to you. As you said, the Cipd is one of the world's largest HR institutes, so we look after the professional body for HR and for learning. We have this very large membership around the world, and we continue to grow. The importance of HR as a profession, I think, has never been more profound. Because of the challenges we face today around the nature of work, changing nature of work, changing nature of the workforce, and so on. And as you said, the Charles E. Jacob Gold Medal does honour a great Irishman. And I've learned more about the history of the Jacob factory in the last few days than I ever knew before. I knew something of the history of work. And I think it's this extraordinary parallel with some of the things that Charles Jacob talked about and did back in 1913, which we now talk about today, almost in some ways as if they're revolutionary. We are in very challenging times. Everywhere we're seeing the importance of engaging and working with people, building more diverse workforces, giving opportunity to very different people to come into the world of work. Not only is profoundly important for us as business people, but it's profoundly important for us, for society and economies at large. And I'm very privileged to stand here and represent this group, and we have the National Committee of the Cipd here and the officers of the Cipd, and many other employers who are closely associated with doing the kinds of programs of work that you touched on. So I think it is appropriate in this year that we recognise you and what you've done, and offer you the gold medal for your outstanding advocacy and concern for people and their development, which you so eloquently touched on. So in conclusion, President, you are in what we in HR would call a good all-rounder. I know you're a writer, you're an academic, you're a statesman, you're a human rights advocate, you're a promoter, great promoter and champion of inclusive citizenship, and a champion of creativity within Irish society. You've served at almost every level of public life, including, of course, at ministerial level, and in a lifetime of firsts, you were the first recipient of the Sean McBride Peace Prize. You're also, as many of you know, a great poet, and I'm going to take the liberty of quoting one of your poems. And in your poem, When My Time Will Come, you close with this profound observation. When my time comes, I will have made my journey, and through all my senses will explode the evidence of light and air and water, fire and earth. I live for that moment. So, President Higgins, your inspirational journey has demonstrated to us that it is possible to create a more productive, fair, and people-centered society. And all it really takes is vision and the courage to persist. And I think we would all echo that. So I'd like now, President, to present you with the gold medal.